We have
Mr. McIsaac?
a second conversation from Mr. Brendan McIsaac tonight. He's our supervisor of English. He's going to present on work in the English department, and we'll touch on sort of how some of these things are playing out in that department as well. Now, the Student Life and Program Committee at its meeting last Monday, formulated some questions to help guide Mr. McIsaac's presentation today. So I do urge everyone, if we come out of this presentation with still some questions unanswered or some new questions strike you over the next week or so, then we want to gather those and bring them back to Mr. McIsaac to help, maybe through the Student Life and Program Committee or through some follow-up presentations here to the full board. We'll be able to flesh out some answers for you. Go ahead, Mr. McIsaac. It's all yours.
All right. Hi. Thank you. Everyone hear me okay?
Yep.
I want to apologize for committing the cardinal sin of following a presentation with a presentation. I thought briefly of doing it as an interpretive dance, but I thought that wouldn't go well for any of us, and a few of us would probably get hurt in the process.
That doesn't play well to the online audience either.
So
really
just introducing a few members of the English department. A few weeks ago when we had Spirit Week on our Decades Day, there was a group of us who decided to go with the 80s grunge look, and that is our hoped-for forthcoming album of the Seattle sound that we hope to pull off. But it's really just a way of saying that I have a great department of really dedicated, creative, and dynamic individuals who really sort of embrace any challenge and are constantly reinventing what they do and what we do here at the school. A few quick words on structure. Ms. Cangelisi-Haid asked that I talk about that a little bit. Just reading the room here, I'm going to say everybody had a high school experience like I did, where you probably took an English 1, English 2, English 3, and English 4. Somewhere along the line, one of those became American Lit, another one became Brit Lit, and maybe in the 90s somewhere one of them became World Lit. We've never followed that kind of prescriptive model here per se. Each of our levels tends to be multi-genre approach. And the other thing is, over the course of students' time here, the choices they have available to them continue to expand. So we do start with sort of a core freshman experience, and that's offered at an academic level, a CP, and an honors level. But by sophomore year, we've begun layering in things like AP Seminar, which is part of the AP Seminar and Research capstone experience, which they can take as sophomores. They can begin as sophomores or begin as juniors. By junior year, our honors kids, the kids who have been in honors freshman and sophomore English, we are really trying to move them to that AP track, and the majority of them go into AP language. I will say that we have good levels of success there, and in a given year we have about 200 kids going into AP language, so upwards of 30% of the grade, where a lot of traditional schools and approaches will have that closer to 10% or less in some cases. And we have very high levels of success with students who are interested into moving into that level of challenge. We also open up some honors classes, some additional honors classes to the kids at the grade 11 level. That course, which I'll mention a little bit later, does actually have a little bit of a global focus, but not in the traditional sense, but rather in terms of very contemporary literature. That's where you'll find your books like your I Am Malalas or the stories of boy soldiers, or books about youth around the world and the kinds of experiences that they're having. And then by 12th grade, we really try to open it up. And a few years ago, we surveyed the students to kind of find out what kinds of experiences they wanted to have as they culminated their time with us. And we got great feedback from them. They wanted sci-fi and fantasy. They wanted sports and literature. They wanted media and literature. They wanted short stories. So we began to develop and offer all of those courses, and they are thankfully robustly selected each year. And I think allowing kids to really customize a senior experience that they enjoy and the teachers really enjoy giving to the kids as well. So again, it's this idea of expanding options and opportunities for kids as they move through our program. And we really allow kids to move from level to level. If they want to take that challenge, we encourage them to take that challenge. And we work with them. And over the years, I don't have pandemic era data, but I would say we would see in a given year the number of kids stepping up to an honors level if we had, high 20 to 30% freshmen. It was going over 30 into sophomore year and going up again into junior year. This, I think, is really more where the magic happens, the philosophy and sort of practices. And some of it, I think, speaks to a little bit of what Dr. Charney was alluding to. And again, if I go back and read the room and talk about our typical high school English experience, most of us probably remember a high school experience where we were given every single book that we were going to read. And we were told, you will read this, and you will read this. And we will read it together and discuss it as a class. And that will more or less be the totality of our experience. We take a very mixed approach, and it's one that's developed over the years. The structures that we use in the classroom, reading and writing workshop, really seek to kind of upend the stand and deliver approach of instruction, but really to become sort of a side-by-side approach where kids are always reading and always writing, and we're always right there beside them. Modeling good reading, modeling good writing, sharing those practices and modeling those practices and having students engage in those practices as well. A number of years ago, as we sought to diversify the choice element in curriculum, we brought back in silent sustained reading because we wanted to demonstrate if we value reading. I think one of my critiques when I stepped into this position was when I asked teachers, what's most important to us? And they said reading and writing. And I had to sort of bluntly say, why are those the two things I'm least likely to see happening in the classroom? So we brought reading back into the classroom. We brought the writing back into the classroom so that teachers could very closely engage with those processes with students. And a lot of these practices are very common in K-8 instruction, less so in high school instruction. But you see a lot of conferencing, both around reading and writing, and you really have that opportunity to talk to a student one-on-one. And teachers who might have been initially hesitant about engaging in those practices learned very quickly in a few questions you can find out if a kid is reading or not reading and what they can tell you about their understanding of it. So they develop lots of good processes where the students themselves will now often lead those conferences, and it's often then targeted to specific skills. Talk to me about theme, talk to me about conflict, talk to me about characterization. Tell me what you're understanding. What are the big ideas that are happening here, and how can we trace that through the duration of our reading? The reading itself, we kind of do a division of thirds. So a third of the things that we will read as a class. A third of the things that we'll read, you will read in small groups, literature circles. And a third of the things that you read will be your own independent selection, because one of the things we wanted to do was to create lifelong readers. We didn't want to create students who came out of high school hating reading and stopping reading. And the feedback we've gotten from kids and parents has been phenomenal because, sadly, they will tell you, this is the first time I've read a book in years of school, because you've empowered a kid to make a selection. And I've seen that happen even in my own instruction. A book that I might give you, you might resist because it's not your choice. But if I say, pick something over here, you're going to grab it, you're going to find something that speaks to you, you're going to read it, and I'm going to have conversations with you, and I'm going to get you to write about it as well. More recently, on the writing side, the past 3 years, we've partnered with the National Writing Project, and we've really been trying to diversify the writing that kids do in class. And this has been a multi-year undertaking and things we've been doing and being very creative with. But it really comes down to authenticity. Again, if I go back to the majority of what our writing experiences were, it was probably things like book reports. And those of you who wrote book reports probably went out into a world and discovered that book reports don't exist in the world outside of English classrooms. So what we've tried to do is identify what is the writing in the real world that gets at the skills that we want kids to learn and be able to do, and how do we have them engage with and create things that excite them. So book reports don't exist, but book reviews exist everywhere, from Amazon to newspapers to what have you, and you read them, You learn what the characteristics of a well-written piece of writing is, which invariably partakes of multiple genres, from argument to narration to explanation. And using modeling from those samples, those lessons in students' own work, you create things that look like writing in the real world. So when you're doing analysis, you could be reviewing a restaurant, you could be reviewing a movie, you could be reviewing your favorite sports team, or a game even. And kids engage with that, and they understand the concepts of analysis and explanation and how to engage an audience. We've also done a lot with just creative digital kinds of writing. Our freshmen and sophomores start their digital portfolios. We have teachers having kids delivering TED Talks, creating video essays that look like everything from YouTube explainer videos to really creative narrative, and in some cases heart-wrenching sort of stories that kids can tell in a video format, where they're now thinking not only in terms of text, but visual, music, and bringing that all together in something that they really get invested in. Moving on to what's new this year, I think recently, over the past couple of months, you've had the opportunity to approve several new courses. We did a revision on our Honors American Literature course, turning it into Honors American Voices. And we're really able to bring in the diverse voices of the American experience. Students right now are reading Louise Erdrich's Night Watchman, the story of a Native American experience. And if you've been following in the news, the schools and some of the stories of what has happened to Native American children over the years. And it gives you a sense of just some of the different themes they're exploring. Our senior inquiry course is modeled somewhat on the AP capstone experience, but it's not beholden to AP. It really is our own creature. And it's a great capstone opportunity for kids to, whether it's independently explore an interest that's of a great passion of theirs. It can dovetail very nicely with the kids who are in any of the academies, that if you have a kid who's in computer science or robotics, really wants to dive down into that reading and writing and create those kinds of products, there's opportunities for them to do that. Or even for the kid who just wants to go out and create, make a difference in the world and create action and get involved in activities around the community or create events. What does it take to do the research, to understand, to write, to promote, and to make those kinds of things happen? And the unit titles there at the bottom sort of give you a sense of that inquiry exploration that they have. Some revised units include our identity and coming of age units, which we've had for many years in the freshman-sophomore experience, but we've been able to diversify the voices and perspectives in there. So, no longer is coming of age defined by Holden Caulfield and Catcher in the Rye, but rather many titles that students can find and connect with. In many cases, going right over here to that wall of memoirs and finding the titles that speak to what kids are going through and in ways that kids are curious about or exploring or engaging with. And this sort of articulates, as I said before, with that English 3 global perspective that students are encountering. Changing direction a little bit, one of the goals, following up on the data discussion that Ms. Cangelosi-Hayde was highlighting, we're really developing capacity this year. We are employing 3 different data platforms. You've heard about Linkit. My AP language teachers are using AP Classroom, which has a series of 8 to 10 unit reviews. And we're also piloting an AP Lit UWorld, which was offered to us for free at the end of last year to pilot, and we're trialing it a little bit this year. But in each case, you have multiple markers of measuring skills throughout the course of the year. And in terms of what the teachers are doing, we've been through that first phase, so they're identifying what the weaknesses and what the strengths are. They can begin to manipulate that information. We can look at it at the grade level. A teacher can look at each of their classes and see if there's differences, or they can look at groups of students within classes or individuals, in the case of RTI students, and say, what is that student's particular need? What are the skills that they struggle with the most? As professional learning communities, PLCs, they then get together and they talk about what they are each seeing. What is the data telling us? What are you noticing? Are we all struggling with that concept, or am I having success with that? And that's really a conversation for further in the year. But it also allows them to know that there are areas where kids are doing well. And even though that might have been something I emphasized, maybe I don't need to emphasize it as much, but rather divert attention over to these areas of need. And then as you move through each cycle of assessment, you're reevaluating. How did we do? Did they do better on some of those early skills? Did new skills present themselves that we have to address? And each step along the way, you can kind of evaluate that. And you've probably seen diagrams like this that show that cycle of data analysis, goal setting, responding to it, reassessing, and then analyzing once again. I won't say too much on response to intervention. Ms. Cangelosi-Hayes spoke about that. We are, though, focusing on the juniors a little bit here because they're the ones who have the new graduation assessment coming for them this year, and for the past 2 years, they have not had standardized assessments. So we are identifying and reaching into classrooms to work with those students, or study hall, or reading and writing labs, or because teachers have access to this data, the classroom teacher, knows this particular student needs this skill focus. So how do I put emphasis or extra attention on that need in my conversations with that student or the work that that student is doing? You got the Start Strong data. What I found interesting here, as limited as it was, 3 years ago, the last time we had the NJSLA, our freshmen and sophomores, the proficiency rate was about 81 to 83%. So looking at less support and some support, that's landing in that 80% range. Whether or not that matches up to those numbers, that struck me as sort of an interesting barometer against what limited information we have here. But as we work with Linkit, we'll continue to see if that holds or if that fluctuates. And then kind of what was alluded to, as you get results, you learn what skills kids are doing well with, and you learn, okay, what are the areas that we need to focus on? So some general observations. Kids have a little bit of a tougher time with literary texts than informational texts. Informational texts, by their nature, seek to be clearly giving you a line of argument or reasoning. Literary texts, they're more complex, they're more inferential, they're more symbolic, they're more craft-oriented, and you kind of have to infer a little bit more of what's going on. So that becomes an area of concentration. Something else that sort of struck us is that kids really struggled with, depending on how familiar you are with the park or the NJSLA, they have certain items which they call like text hotspots or drop and drag items that often, instead of asking you, pick the correct answer out of these 5, it's saying, here's 8 pieces of evidence. Select 3 of them that support that idea. So right there, kids are juggling more variables in that moment. And also, they haven't done these tests for the past 2 years, so they're a little bit out of practice. So that's something that we're going to have to look at as we go forward. So same thing for grade 11. Just noteworthy here that this didn't include the AP language kids because they were using the AP classroom. So this is the non-AP kids. But again, the more complex, more multi-select, more variable kinds of things are the more challenging things for the kids. And then AP language in using AP classroom, area of strength, areas of growth, and already the teachers are beginning to look at this data and they're coming up with ideas. They're saying, okay, they're struggling with like these multi-select items. So maybe some of the tasks that we do, if I'm asking for 1 example, maybe I'm saying provide 3. Read through this and find 3 things in this piece that really support the author's argument. Or find 3 moments in this short story that really pivotally develop the character. So giving kids sort of simulations of those types of experiences, I can do that in a one-on-one conference. I can do that as a task in a literature circle. I could do that when we do our silent sustained reading for the day. I can say, all right, we're going to read for 15 minutes. I want you to identify this or this or this. Think about that. And then when you're done, share it with your partner. Let's hear a few of those. What are we seeing? So already teachers are thinking about the tools and the mechanisms that they use in their day in, day out instruction and deciding, how do I refine, how do I tweak, how do I make it address the things that we want to give the kids more practice with. This is just sort of the schedule for the year, where your Form B and Form C happens, where that graduation assessment is in March, so that kind of has its own unique sort of challenge, being earlier in the year. And then at the bottom, it's kind of the ongoing supports, be it spring tutorials, RTI, that we kind of have going on throughout. And these are the teams. These are the teachers who are working at each of those levels. And you'll notice, by design, teachers will often have their foot in more than one level. I'm working with freshmen, but I'm also working with juniors so that I understand about what I do here and what the expectations are going to be there. One of the other nice dynamics is having teachers who are teaching both at an AP or an honors level, but also working at a CP or an academic level, so they can really appreciate the breadth of skill sets that kids bring to the classroom. And I know from my own experience, you learn very quickly that the things you do in an AP classroom, you can bring to a CP classroom. You just have to adapt them, and the kids are just as eager to run with those kinds of things. So as I said at my opening, we have a great team. They're a dynamic bunch. They're creative. They're always inventing and reinventing themselves, and they look forward to the challenges of the year. So I thank you. Questions?
Thank you. All right. Anything for Mr. McIsaac? Go ahead, Rob.
I have a question. You mentioned, you used the word authenticity at the beginning of your presentation. Can you tell us, do any of the writing or other products that students create address authentic audiences, i.e. audiences beyond the classroom?
Yes, and it's sort of the goal of the process. Again, old school, you were always writing for an audience of one,
Correct.
Me, the teacher. At a minimum, the audience is with the amount of like peer sharing and peer feedback, so our peers are reviewing our work. And by design, you're trying to create product that has a place in the real world. So teachers experiment with everything from, we're going to read Romeo and Juliet, you're going to read some articles about teen psychology, and you're going to write a letter to your parents that brings all of those things together and just talks about what's going on in the teen brain. And let me tell you about the story of Romeo and Juliet, and let me talk to you, Mom and Dad, about, why I'm the way I am, or something like that. Or kids who are engaging in, I'm trying to remember the NPR initiative where they have you go and interview like a grandparent over the holidays so that you can put that narrative together and submit it to the Library of Congress. And we've really tried to do a lot with the LAMP as well. I mean, you have this vehicle to publish in-house and solicit from students. So sometimes you're getting to those audiences, a popular one in English 3. As you're identifying a topic or issue that you're passionate about, who's somebody in the community who has weight around that issue, from a local political representative or legislator? I know Dr. Moore has received letters, probably Mr. Panico, where kids realize that they can engage in the real world and the power of writing can get their message to those folks.
It's very exciting.
Yes, Mr.
Can
Davidson.
we get a copy of your presentation? There's so much useful information in it.
I shared it with Ms. Spitzer, so I think you have hard copy, and then if you want electronic, I can get that through to you as well.
Think about them.
If you go to the superintendent's report, it's attached.
Yeah, it should be there already.
Yeah, and we'll get Jess's there
Okay.
as well.
On the board docs.
Yeah.
Okay. Oh, okay, thank you. I
Yeah.
didn't see that.
Yes.
So, excellent presentation, and I know from my own kids that attended these courses, very rich, robust curriculum, and it's done them worlds of good down the road, including lifelong learning. So I thank you personally for that. I am interested in some of the sub-scores you talked about inference. That's a tough one for students. as well as academic vocabulary. Do we have any data that show how our students do with regard to that? And you did also mention you target that, and I'm convinced you do, but how, for example, do we target academic vocabulary?
Well, I guess the vocabulary that you tend to, well, what you see on the assessments tends to be selected vocabulary in the passages that you're reading, and then your approximate understanding of what that word is. And we actually do tend to do quite well. I mean, the argument when it comes to reading is you become a better reader by reading, and the more you read, the better it gets, as opposed to discrete vocabulary study. But where academic vocabulary does come in is it's the language of literature. You know, do we understand characterization, conflict, plots, themes, setting? When it comes to argumentation, do we understand the language of rhetoric and argumentation, ethos, logos, pathos? And we embed those into the curriculum so that when you're in those narrative units, those argument units, those are the concepts that you're studying. And kind of back to the point, when you're writing that letter to a legislator, how are you incorporating ethos, logos, and pathos into that argument? Now, admittedly, that is a little bit more of an AP level skill. And the things that you're referring to, pre-Common Core was the domain of AP. And then it really sort of, many of those skills got pushed into standard classes as a result. And so then we just vertically articulate them down. The freshmen learn about ethos, logos, pathos. The sophomores begin to learn about rhetorical strategies, rhetorical techniques, so that by the time they're walking into AP language as juniors, that's not shockingly new to them. They've had some experience with it. The trick in AP language is like, great, how is the author now using those things to effectively get a message across? And that's sort of that next level challenge. But again, it's questioning, it's tasks. You know, I could ask you an old school question, what happened? Or I can ask you a more involved question about, you know, let's talk about how the conflicts this character faced and what we can infer about what it means, or zeroing in on a moment. What is an author saying that they're not saying? What's between those lines? What is suggested by this? Find that phrase, find that word that is the crucial lever in this passage that we're reading, and let's explode that and talk about what's going on there. And I mean, to be honest, that's as much art as it is science when you're engaging with it. And I mean, that's part of the magic of the discipline, and whether it's poetry or argumentation. And it's part of what we hope to impress upon the kids.
Thank you.